This is the Darien Gap. It's physically impossible to cross from North America to South America by road, and this is why. If you drove all the way from the top of Alaska to the south of Central America, you'd reach a point where all that is left between you and South America is this border between Panama and Colombia. The road would literally end here. Crossing is easier said than done, because all there is for miles across the border is dense swamplands and jungle. There's no way to drive through it. If you want to go by land, you have to physically hike through the thick jungle, which has become a hotspot for some of the world's most dangerous people to hide, while also being used as a route for migrants in search of a better life, who often wind up as victims. Psychologists who work with many migrants who pass through the area describe the gap as a nightmare with 1,001 demons. This is the Darien Gap, a 60-mile stretch that to this day has prevented a road from being built across the Americas. And I've been looking into this gap because by and large, it's considered one of the most dangerous strips of land in the world. And today we're going to find out why. More than being a travel choke point, the harsh conditions of the Darien Gap make it a nightmare to cross. This area is covered by rolling hills wrapped in rainforest, with rivers winding through the region, often swelling and flooding. Due to being a construction no-go zone, thanks to a mixture of environmental, economic, and indigenous concerns, the area is teeming with a wide variety of animals. This includes the bushmaster snake, which is both aggressive and highly venomous. This area is also home to the ceiba tree, a tropical tree found in the rainforest that can grow to over 70 meters and can prove to be a valuable asset for the few people who do live in the Darien Gap, including members of indigenous groups who have resided there for centuries. Despite these conditions, thousands of people do make their way through the region every year, and overwhelmingly, these people will fall into one of two groups. The first are outlaws, militant groups, gang members, and drug smugglers. In a report done by a PBS reporter, it was stated that at several points, smugglers were encountered carrying literal bricks of cocaine with them out in the open. The second and larger group are migrants. Many come from South American or Caribbean countries such as Venezuela or Haiti, places rocked by economic and political instability, fleeing towards North America in the search of a potentially better life. And this journey northward takes them directly through the Darien Gap. As of 2022, no ferries run between Colombia and Panama, and there are no plans to build a road through the gap. Some ferry crossings have been tried in the past, but the last one went out of business in 2018. According to a report from 2015, despite operating for years, the ferry had failed to ever become profitable. But how did things get this way, and why is it unlikely that anything will be done about this anytime soon? To understand this, we have to go through the development of the Pan American Highway. So it's 1890, and a meeting is being held in Washington, D.C. One of the ideas put forward during the conference was for a Pan-American railway. However, the idea was abandoned after Panama declared independence, and instead, the big international Pan-American project that we got was the construction of the Panama Canal in 1937. However, the idea was revived when the financial house of cards collapsed and the overinflated stock market plunged into a Great Depression. As the world was suffering from the Great Depression, people in many nations began wondering if they could perhaps improve conditions by working together on a massive infrastructure project. So representatives of a bunch of North and South American countries signed an agreement called the Convention of the Pan-American Highway. This document outlined a plan to construct a massive series of roadways that could allow someone, in theory, to drive or take a bus all the way from the south of Chile to the north of Alaska. For a time, construction went along swiftly. Mexico completed its section of the highway in 1950, and more countries followed in the coming years. Formally speaking, the entire U.S. interstate system is considered part of the Pan-American Highway. So let's say you decide to embark on a road trip starting in Alaska. You head through British Columbia, into the main part of the states, and down through Mexico and into Central America. And if you've got a killer road trip playlist, all goes well until you reach Panama. After crossing the Panama Canal, you drive just 5 hours more and finally reach this tiny town. It's at this point that you've reached the Darien Gap. Unless you're willing to turn back, stock up on supplies, and go on by foot, or just give up on driving and find a way to ship yourself and your car to Colombia. You found yourself at an impasse. So what happened? Well, it's kind of complicated, so I'm going to break it down for you. The Pan-American Highway was set to be constructed in 3 phases. Well, technically, the US and Canada both intended to wrap their portions of the PAH into their existing plans for major highway development. But the first of the 3 formal stages was being built from Laredo, Texas, to Mexico City. From there, the second stage began and became what is also now often called the Inter-American Highway. This portion stretches from Mexico City to Panama City and had its construction aided by the U.S. Army's Corps of Engineers at the time. Though Panama was independent, the Panama Canal was a U.S. possession. However, few, if any, international roads connected the nations of Central America. The thinking here was that by aiding the construction of these roads, the U.S. would be better able to send in troops to defend the Panama Canal in a war situation. That section was completed in 1941 and was later extended to the edge of the Darien Gap. The third and final stage begins in Turbo, Colombia, and extends to the national parks in the south of Argentina. Thanks to how road networks in South America have expanded in the past decades, you can infer from there, get on an unofficial extension from the Pan-American Highway, and that'll take you all the way through Chile. But why the Gap? Part of it is money. The Gap encompasses not only rainforest, but also swamps, marshes, and dangerous native species. And especially in a more and more environmentally conscious world, both the involved governments would want to complete such construction with as little environmental damage as possible, which would be massively expensive, potentially costing hundreds of millions of dollars. And environmental concerns are the biggest reason why the Darien Gap hasn't been built through. Construction plans with backing from the United States government were agreed on and set to begin in both 1971 and in 1992, but both times they were halted over environmental concerns. And that's not to mention calls from local indigenous people not to build through their land and disrupt their way of life. Surprisingly, one of the biggest sources of continued outcry against any construction through the Darien Gap actually comes from farmers and ranchers throughout North America,